Steve Hayes Get Up and Go Show. Good morning, 647 with some Motown from Diana Ross and the Supremes on Key 100 FM.
Hey everybody, welcome to another Radio Days. I am Gary Music Miller, and we've got a very, very special guest today, and I'll introduce him to you in just a couple minutes. If you don't already know who he is, this is something a lot of you have been waiting a long time for and have just bombarded me with mail about these guys. And you are very popular with the old Key crowd. So
thank you, Gary.
We'll talk about you in a minute. Let me just tell you, first thing, I would wait till the end of this show, and it's probably going to be a long one because we have a tendency to twist and turn. And with this guy, it's hard to tell where we're going to end up. He's got memories about me that I don't even have. And you have to remember that I had 2 brain surgeries. That's nothing to joke about, but I have holes in my memory. But wait till the end of the show, if you would. We're coming to you from the Museum of Radio and Technology at 1640 Florence Avenue in Huntington. The website is www.mrtwv.org, Instagram mrt.wv, Twitter wvmrt, and when this museum, I don't know what to say about it that I haven't already said. It's filled with memorabilia, radio, television. I mean, you'll see what some of the people you watched on TV, you'll see them again and go, I forgot about that person. And you'll get your first look at a lot of people that were on the radio that you didn't know what they looked like. This building also houses the West Virginia Broadcasting Hall of Fame. And what else? Something about the next show, but I can't even read my own writing, so I'm not going to worry about that. But feel free to write me, Radio Days with Gary Music Miller, rdwgmn @gmail.com, or you can make a comment on the video, and I imagine we'll get a few on this one. And you can always tweet me at Gary Music Miller, X me, I guess, anymore. With me today is somebody you've been asking me for, and I'm so happy you're still around because...
well, the warrants have all expired, so I'm now free to roam the public.
We just lost one of our, just a few weeks ago, one of our classmates, our radio mates.
We did.
When we lost Scott Brady, Dan Hatton. And right before we began this show, about 4 years ago, we lost Jack O'Shea.
Yep.
It's really troubling to me to think that from 10 in the morning to 10 at night, we had Jack on from 10 to 2. He's gone. Scott was on 2 to 6. He's gone. And you inherited me, like you said earlier off the air, 6 to 10.
Yeah.
But I'm having trouble remembering. A lot of you have asked, this is Steve Hayes. If I haven't said that already, if I need to say that, I'm sure you read it in the header on the thing. Steve is as much a legend, an icon, as you can imagine. He was somebody that I listened to as a listener, and probably as the first time when I started radio in 71, he was already in the big time. I was at the lowest rated radio station in town, and I had no experience or anything, and I've told that story many times in the past. But Steve was a night guy that I looked up to, and then a morning guy that I worked with. He was my boss at one time. I became a boss all of a sudden. We learned the difference between performers and administrators, and I found out real fast I was not a good administrator.
You have to tell people what to do.
Yeah, well, you do, and tell them when they're doing things wrong. And I just was too much of a buddy with these guys. I came in 78, and it was around when you left. We'll get into that. But tell me first, Steve, how in the world did you begin at Key? Where did you come from, and where did you go to?
All right. Well, let me first say that it is a pleasure to be here with Gary Music Miller of Key 100 FM because you and I go way back, and I got some stories that I'm going to tell you, which is, by the way, in this book. I'm not going to shamelessly plug it too much.
Please do, because I didn't.
Well, I just want to.
He's got two now, don't you?
I've written 6, but this is the latest one about radio.
Okay,
that
good.
you're in, and I just want to point that out. And I'll get to this later, but this is part of what I have done over the last year. And
the name of the book is?
It's called "Don't Touch That Radio Dial." You don't know where it's been, and it's on Amazon.
That's
and
wonderful.
you can order it from there. But okay, so let's go back to the beginning. You bring up Jack O'Shea, for instance. I started out in radio when I was 15 years old. I was working for WIOI in Portsmouth, Ohio.
Okay.
Started out running the church tapes and all kinds of things, and finally graduated to actually playing records on the air.
What year are we talking about?
Oh, by the time I actually got on the air to start playing real records instead of church tapes in the God Squad, I was probably right around 17, 18 years old. So
1971?
Yeah, that era, 70, 71. And then in 1972, it was a cold February afternoon, and I was on the air. I was going to Ohio University at the time, but I was coming home and working radio on the weekends. And I was majoring in radio and television, or trying to anyway. And it's a Sunday afternoon, and I was this was before David Letterman did the Larry the Lobster thing, should he boil or should he not? But I was doing it with the Donny Osmond record. Okay. I had taken a acetylene torch from the engineer's office that I'd found, and what I was going to do is take 20 calls on the air, and should I torch the record or should I not? Turned out that I had a bunch of juvenile delinquents that called up that said, yeah, do it. So I ended up torching this record on the air. And so anyway, it wasn't long after that, the phone was ringing off the hook.
And this is in
Portsmouth. This is in Portsmouth.
All right.
So I was afraid that one of these calls
might be from Donny Osmond.
would be from the general manager telling me I've had my last radio program. But it turned out that after the phones died down a little bit, the phone rang and I was brave enough to answer it. Turned out to be Jack O'Shea.
Oh, wow.
And Jack had been listening in his kitchen to my show in Portsmouth, and it was, hi, this is Jack O'Shea.
Wow.
I loved his voice. I mean, he had such a great voice. And anyway, long distance, I'll quicken this up. Actually, he liked what he heard, and they were looking for a night guy.
At Key.
At Key.
Okay.
And he asked if I would be considered coming up, bringing up a tape. At the time, we had tapes of ourselves. And I said, yeah, I would. So the next week, I went back to Ohio University. Then I went to Huntington to meet with Jack. But turned out that Jimmy Mack, Louis Valentine Mueller III, was actually the program director. So I met with him and Jack. And so they listened to my tape, which was kind of intimidating because you've got 3 guys, well, me, one of them, standing around and they're listening, critiquing your work in front of you. Yeah, you know, it wasn't one of the things where they told me to leave. Long story short, they gave me the job, so I had to go back and quit school. But my parents were cool with that, and I was, because I was going to college to learn how to do what they had offered me the job.
Exactly.
So I came to work in February of 1972 during nights for WKEE.
Okay, so that would have been, I started in 71 at WWHY, and which nobody listened to. I was there for 4 years, but you were doing the night thing, and
yeah, I was.
Very much inspiring me.
Well, thank you. I appreciate those kind words.
Very definitely. Yeah. I mean, you know, I remember you being very funny.
I tried
as much as I could.
And we're going to get to that in a minute about you when we start. But I wanted to mention that I did nights at WKEE for about almost 2 years. And then...
who took your place? Curious. Do you have any idea?
I'm not sure.
It would not have been me unless you lasted 6 years there.
No, I'm not sure. I
don't even know who I replaced. That's a crazy thing.
Yeah, I went to Daytona Beach on a vacation. And the crazy part was I ended up having an audition tape in my car. Okay. And I had called the radio station to Daytona Beach to ask if I could see the station. You know, back then we were all kind of nosy as to what everybody was doing. And so anyway, I would go to this radio station, and the program director gives me a tour, you know, of the whole station, and everything. And I just thought he was being nice. And at the end, he says, by the way, we have an opening here. Do you have, by chance, a tape?
Wow.
I said, well, yeah. I ran out to the car and brought him in a tape. And almost the same exact thing happened. I'm standing there, and he puts the tape on, and he listens to it. And he says, how would you like to come to the world's most famous beach? And I said, okay. So I came back. I quit Key and went to Daytona Beach, where I was for almost 2 years down there.
And that would have been
from 72 to 70, well, 70 to 5, yeah, 73, 73 to 75.
I got to try to coordinate these dates with my career and your career.
73 to 75.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did that. Then I went to Jacksonville for about 7 months.
Okay.
WIVY in Jacksonville, which, by the way, now is in Kentucky. I found out down near Moorhead, maybe in Moorhead.
Wow. Okay.
The call letters are down there. But
heard of people moving. I've not heard of radio station.
I'm moving another radio station.
Okay.
So a good friend of ours, Rob Shibley, who I never got a chance to work with when he came to Key in the early 70s and kind of took it over. And he was a great program director, but he was also a great radio mind and turned out to be a great radio friend. He ended up hiring me 4 different times in my career. But he hired me to come back in 1976 to work. I told him I probably wouldn't be there for very long, but he said, well, come back and do what you can do. So I came back.
All right.
And in September of 1976, I got hired to go to ABC's KAUM in Houston, Texas. So I quit and went to Houston for almost 3 years, and then went to Cincinnati to do mornings. That's where I got started in mornings in Cincinnati.
Okay.
And that would have been 1978. And then getting to when I inherited you.
Well, that's the year I came to Key.
Okay.
That's the year.
Rob Shibley hired me in 1980 to be the program director of the Morning Man, because Rick Robinson was going to go to become a member of the West Virginia State Police.
Right.
And he had been working towards that. So it was March of, I believe, 1980. I walked into the radio station for the first time, and I was the program director, Morning Man. Jack was doing the middays at that time. Afternoons, I'm a little fuzzy.
That's a big question mark for me, too.
Who was doing afternoons at that particular time? But Gary Music Miller, Key 100 FM, he was banging it out at night and doing such a great job. I mean, I had such admiration for nighttime radio because I had done it, and I was listening to this guy do it the way it was supposed to be done. It really was.
Well, and I let the guys who rolled in here at night, the Dick Beyondies and John Rickards, Landeckers, and those guys influenced me, but I never copied them. I just let them influence me.
You did. You had a style. You had a very unique style, Gary.
Oh, he's a good actor.
Well,
that's what we're going to talk about. You know.
Well, your persona on the air, and you've said this before. I'm not saying anything you didn't know. Is not like he was around the radio station, because I found Gary as the program director, and he was the music director of Key at the time. One of the funniest guys I've ever met, because he was sly, funny, very under the radar funny, and would do things that would just absolutely crack you up. Couple things I'm going to tell a story.
Okay.
Is that we had set up an interview with the guys from Asia. Carl Palmer was one of them. I can't remember off the top of my head the rest of them.
Okay. But
it had to be a taped interview. And so this is right when they kind of breaking out, you know, with their hits and stuff. And so anyway, we went in. Gary was with me, and we had to tape this thing. And we had all 3 of these guys, and I'm not sure they were even in the country. They were maybe in England or somewhere.
Right.
And we were trying to get these guys to do an interview, and they were obviously they were medically enhanced. Okay. Can I say that? Just a little medically enhanced.
They were under the influence.
So anyway, we were unable to get any semblance of unity what these guys were talking about. And it was once we'd get one of the guys on and try to ask him a legitimate question, the other guy would start laughing, and then he'd start laughing. And so we went probably 15, 20 minutes on a supposed interview and got absolutely nothing.
Got nothing out of it, yeah.
Nothing out of it. So, of course...
It reminds me slightly the story. I don't know whether you were there or not.
Well, wait, I got to finish the story here.
Oh, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
So Gary...
I thought that was it.
No. So Gary...
I have no memory of it.
Gary goes... This interview was so awful, but it was so awful, it was funny because these guys just couldn't put two words together.
I can only imagine.
So Gary goes into the production room, and he used the production facilities to recreate this interview. And you had to have heard the original to understand how your mind was working at that time. But it was one of the funniest things I've ever heard that Gary did, making fun of these guys doing an interview they couldn't do. So
we were bound and determined to get that interview on, no matter what I had to do,
neither one ever aired. But just the mere fact that Gary did this. And the other, I think, was when we had B. Birtles in from the Little River Band. And
that I don't remember at all.
Well, he came in. He came in from the Little River Band. They were here in Huntington to do a concert.
Yes.
Yeah. And you had, at this time, it was Scott Brady or Dan Hatton was doing the afternoon show.
Yeah.
Well, you had convinced him that he was talking to a member of Air Supply.
Okay.
And for the first part of the interview, because Scott was a great guy. I mean, one of the all-time wonderful guys, but sometimes didn't do his homework on an interview that he had coming up.
Yeah.
And Gary was out in the hall telling him about Air Supply and the guy from Air Supply that was going to be on the show, when it was actually going to be somebody from the Little River Band. And so Scott got in the air, and the first couple questions were Air Supply questions until their manager, who was sitting in your office, the music room, said, "What the hell is he talking about? The Little River, that's the Little River Band, not Air Supply."
Yeah.
And so he gets up and runs into the studio, and you start laughing, and I start laughing because we had forgot to tell Scott, that it was a joke. And so he took that to the air, and another Gary Music Miller prank.
Another memory that's fleeting, probably. The one I remember, we played a group called Diesel. The song was called Sausalito Summer Night.
Right.
And somebody set up an interview with me with them. And I got them on the phone, and it was live. And to make a very long story short, nobody spoke English.
No.
So they were like a Dutch group, and I couldn't get anything to them. They couldn't get anything to me. And so that was a bust. And then right after I came to Key, I think 78, 79, I had an interview with Leif Garrett.
Right, Leif Garrett. Right.
And Leif Garrett was on the phone with me, but there was so much noise wherever he was, he couldn't hear a thing I was saying.
Right.
So I'd have to repeat every question. And we finally said, let's just try this another time. We both hung up, and that was the end of it.
Well, there was another interview instance that involved Gary and Rick Swan.
Okay.
Rick Swan, Steve Norman was his real name.
We lost.
And we've lost him, yeah. But we hired him from Portsmouth, and he came to do the 10 to 2 shift. And then I think eventually he went and did middays at Key. But Rick Swan
He did 10 to 2 at night, and then he did middays. Okay.
Well, if you remember, I was supposed to do an interview with Tom Jones. Okay, all right.
I don't remember that.
Follow me with this.
Okay,
all right.
will.
Tom Jones was coming to Huntington to the Civic Center, and but the only time he could do an interview was in the evening because he was in Las Vegas, and he did 2 shows in Las Vegas, and he would call between shows to do the interview. So we were told. So I, of course, worked mornings and found out that he was going to call at 7 o'clock at night. Of course, Gary had already been on the air for an hour.
Well, this sounds vaguely familiar.
Okay. So anyway, I go in and sit there for 2 hours and no Tom Jones. So I get a call the next morning from his manager. I'm sorry, Tom got tied up. He couldn't be there, but he's going to call tonight at 7 o'clock. Same thing happened. I come to the radio station. I sit there, 7 o'clock, no Tom Jones. So while I'm sitting there, I'm writing out a bunch of little stupid questions that I would never asking, like, hey, Tom, do you have any problem picking up chicks? Hey, Tom, do you really put socks in your pants? And just stupid stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, manager calls and says, I swear he's going to call tonight, which would have been the third night.
Yeah.
Well, Rick Swan was there at the radio station because he was getting ready to go on the air at 10.
10, yeah.
10. And I'm sitting there at 7 o'clock, still no Tom Jones. I've had it at that point. So anyway, Rick Swan said, well, if he calls, I'll do the interview. And I said, don't worry about it. He's not going to call. I'm out of here. So Gary, of course, Gary's on the air and Rick's just, so I'm driving home. And the next thing I hear is, Gary, Music Miller. And we have a real treat tonight in the production room right now, live with Tom Jones as Rick Swan. I'm going, he called.
He called, and I missed it.
He called. So then I hear Rick Swan go, oh, I'm here with Tom Jones. And hey, Tom, how are you? Yeah, I'm fine. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, I got some questions I want to ask you. Hey, Tom, do you have any problem picking up chicks? So all of a sudden, my funny list that I had left.
He had picked up your list.
He picks up my list and starts asking Tom Jones all these questions. Do you put socks in your pants? So that.
Are you really from Wales?
I don't have all 10 of the stupid questions I put there, but
that's what Rick ended up doing.
Rick Swan asked all 10. Yeah,
I didn't ever think I'd talk to Tom. Bring up Air Supply. We have to mention that we got our, well, the story with Air Supply, I told this before, but we were supposed to have them on the air in the afternoon.
Right.
And Pete Spazza was the guy's name.
One of the record guys.
Yeah, record label guy, Harris. And I think you'd rented me a car or something. I was to go over and pick them up.
Yes.
And bring them back to the station for an interview.
Right.
Well, Pete walks out and says, it's not going to be an interview. We're not going to the station. We're going to the doctor. And it turns out Russell Hitchcock from Air Supply had thrown his back out. So I ended up from taking him to an interview to taking him to the doctor. And as we're all getting out of the car at the doctor's office, Pete grabs my arm and says, you can't go in. You're just going to have to stay out here. I said, really? And it was like the sweltering 92 degrees or something. And he said, no, they're very private guys. They don't want an audience for their work or whatever. So I sat out in the car. And that was the day I became a chauffeur. And they sit out the car I sat out in the car waiting on them for 3 or 4 hours. And we never did get an interview done, but I did get backstage. And I got an autograph picture for my wife, who was in the hospital at the time.
Okay.
She's still my wife. And of course, we can't forget, we're talking Air Supply, the very first gold record Key ever got. You and I had something to do with it. I remember Pete giving me the album. I always get Lost in Love and All Out of Love confused because they're both the same song almost. But Pete gave me the album, took it home, and I took it home, came back the next day. I said, your next single ought to be, it was either Lost in Love or All Out of Love. That turned into an actual record for them. And little beknownst to me, I don't remember this a whole lot, but I know you and I were on television.
Channel 3 came down and did a story on it. Yeah, Bob Brunner came down and did a story.
Did Bob come down? Because I had not.
He did a story on that. But I think if I remember correctly, you picked out Lost in Love was their first one.
Okay,
And then you
so I
picked
picked
it.
out
Yeah, and
All Out of
Gary,
Love.
right, the man you're looking at right here, and listen, he picked out their second single, which was written by Jim Steinman,
All Out of Love.
All Out of Love. And, you know,
Oh, of
we all
course.
know what happened to it, don't we?
Yeah, and Jim Simon did a lot of work for them. I remember a song I used to call "Making Love Wearing Nothing at All," but it was
Well, that's always kind of a good thing, I guess.
"Making Love Out of Nothing at All." It was a single that Jim Steinman wrote for them.
Well, Gary, it was.
So to say we started. I was on my first commercial job on a station nobody listened to in '71. You're the night guy at Key.
Right.
So do you want to go on with you left and because when I got there in '78, you were gone.
I had left. I left in '76, but I came back in '80.
And I believe it's probably when I met Rob, perhaps.
Rob, because he took over the radio station as program director.
Well, the guy that hired me got fired 2 weeks later.
Yeah. It happens in this business.
I'm sorry I did that to you, Star Steven. He calls me and he says, you know, you guys are doing pretty. He called me at WAMX, which was flat out going against Key at the time on FM. And Star calls me and said, listen, we're the Heritage. I don't. It was almost like he was reading this. He said, "We're the Heritage Top 40 station in town. We're going to be on top. We can do it with you or without you." And then he left it at that. So I went over and met Star. Went through the station in '78. They said, "Oh, by the way, we need a music director." And I actually music directed my whole life.
You did.
From
you did.
'71 till I left radio in 2010.
And you turned me on to so many great songs and tunes and records that nobody else had ever heard of. Because one of the things that I did, if you'll remember, when I was doing the morning show with Clint McElroy, I want to get into that here in a minute about Clint. But I had the dreaded morning oldie. Remember that? I played an awful funny. It can have a lot of different qualities to it.
Yeah.
But it was quirky and just, where did this come from? Everything from a disco version of Stairway to Heaven to anything. But Gary would find these records because he was getting sent hundreds of them a week, and so every now and then, Gary, about every week, he'd come in with 2 or 3 goes, "Hey man, I think you need to put this on for your dreaded morning oldie." And anyway, but it was a great service to have Gary, because he could find the most arcane, the craziest, demented tunes that had ever been released, stuff you would have never heard on commercial radio, but we had the opportunity to play them in the morning. Thank you, Gary, for that.
That was my pleasure. I have so many records at home that I wish had become hits that didn't. And '81 was a big year for me. I had 3 or 4 songs that should have become hits that weren't. But it's like you were the guy in charge, but you actually let me have more than say. If I recall that, you actually would allow me to put something on.
Well, yeah,
I don't remember us having any major meetings the way I did in '88 or '89 was when Key brought in its first out-of-market program director.
Yes.
And I think his name was Pat Paxton, I believe. And they called me into the meeting and said, "You're not going to be making the decisions about what's on the radio now."
Yeah. That was kind of a dark day.
That was a dark day.
That was a dark day.
Because I had done it since I got there in '78. So I wondered how that worked. How did it work between you and I? Did I bring a stack of records into you and you said, play it. If you like it, play it? Or, because I know some things I was semi-responsible.
You brought up a point I'd like to address, if I can.
Please do.
Is when I came up in the program director, and Gary brought this up a little earlier, that it's a combination of management, but you have to be one of the guys. And my philosophy has always been, I've been a program director most of my life, which means I've had to do that. And at the same time, you have to be one of the creative forces. And at the time, we just had some phenomenal people that were working at Key. So my philosophy was it was kind of like Sparky Anderson in the Reds when he had the Big Red Machine. You didn't have to manage these guys too much. You point them in a direction. And Gary was one of the kind of guys that he did his job. I mean, he really did. He found the songs that we needed to play, played the songs that were important to the listeners at that time. So, Gary was the least of any problems you had. Jack O'Shea, of course, had been doing middays forever, and Jack had his show down to legendary proportions. And then afternoons, we had Jason Douglas. Mike Cooper came in. He came in and did afternoons before Dan Hatton, Scott Brady.
Okay.
He was there in 76. That's the missing afternoon guy you were talking about.
Okay.
But Mike Cooper had worked with me at WIOI. He ended up working with me down in Kentucky later on. He was kind of a radio traveling nomad, the traveling gnome of radio. He'd show up in the weirdest places, but he'd always work there for you if you needed him, and we did. But our key staff from 1980 until I left in 1985 was, like I say, everybody was a star and knew what they had to do. So there wasn't a lot of, quote, managing. We were able to put together the Jock Sox, softball, basketball teams, things like that. And we just had a great time. But going to work every day was like just an unbelievable experience because everybody loved everybody. Everybody got along. In the radio industry, as you well know, that doesn't happen a lot where you have a real team. So I just left everybody alone pretty much because they did their job, including you.
Yeah. I was very passionate about music.
Well, he was.
And that's when I had Charlie Dunlap on. I don't know whether that name means anything.
I know Charlie. I've known Charlie forever, yeah.
Charlie was my first top 40 program director. In 1974, I left WWHY, went to WCMI in Ashland, and I don't know whether I should be telling this story or not, but I'm going to tell it anyway. And should lightning hit me,
we do have a chance of thunderstorms and lightning. A real good chance.
We do. Just
go ahead.
About Rob. Rob was a terrific guy. Chris Robbins on the air.
Yeah.
But when I decided to leave WHY in '74, he was the first guy I called. I called in and I said, I'm looking to get out of here and I'm looking to get a job. He said, well, we don't need anybody right now. And I said, well, I'd come down, and I've been on the air for 4 years here. We come down and sweep floors, empty garbage bags or anything. And he said, in typical Rob Shively fashion, I think you'll agree, he said, I don't think you heard me. I said, we don't need anybody right now. And I said, okay, well, thank you for taking my call. Hung up. My next call was to Charlie Dunlap, and Gary Music Miller was sort of born on WCMI in Ashland.
Right.
But what's great about that story is 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever years later, he wasn't there when I began, but he came back.
Yep.
Rob Shogley came back and was like an operations manager / program director, whatever.
Right.
And he brought me in one day and said, Gary, I don't know why you're here. I don't know why you haven't gone to another market. You are one of the best talents I've ever heard. You do such, you're always up tempo. You're always, you sound like you're part of the life of the party. And I had to remind, I said, well, you know what? You could have had me 4 or 5 years earlier, but you turned me down and you wouldn't even talk to me. And he and I got the biggest laugh out of that. So I don't mean anything against.
No. Rob was one of those kind of guys. With Rob Shively, timing was everything because he hired me 4 different times. He hired me back to Key when I came in '76. He hired me back in '80 when I came to do the morning show with Clint. Okay. Then he hired me to go to Danville, Kentucky in 1991 to manage the radio station that they had put on the air when he went to work for Hometown Radio. And then he hired me back to Portsmouth in 1999, which was the best move I've ever made in my life because I'm still there now doing the morning show at at Mix 99.3 NXT FM, but 4 different times. But he was exactly what you said, just one of these kind of guys that would come out of the woodwork and never forgot you. And if there was a job open or something he thought you could fit into, you're the first person he was going to call. Obviously,
He was sorry, in a way, but we got a big laugh out of it. And he would often come in and say, "We're going to lunch today," and he would say that to me, and we'd go out to lunch when I was doing. Probably when I was doing 2 to 7. So now they moved me around so many different places, but I really felt like a night guy, out of place. So trying middays, and then I moved very comfortably into the afternoon shift.
You did.
And I never lost that Gary Music Miller persona.
Well,
So,
if I could tell a story about you being a music director, because
sure.
I've been saving this one because I don't know if you remember this one or not.
Oh, probably not.
It's all in the book. It's called Don't Touch That Radio Dial. You don't know where it's been.
That's
available on Amazon in hardback or paperback or Kindle.
Yeah.
It would have been about 83. And I'll tell the story first and then I'll do a little reprise with you. Because Gary was picking the records pretty much, and as I've already said, doing a great job.
Yeah.
But there was one record that popped up. Every now and then it happens in music, it happens in radio, that it's just...
I think I know where you're going, and you wonder why.
It's just the undefinable it. And that happened to us in the early 80s with a song called Elvira.
It certainly did.
By the Oak Ridge Boys.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, this song emerges. Rock stations, some are playing it, some pop stations are playing it, of course, country radio is playing it, and all of this controversy exploded across the radio universe as to why and who should play this song. Well, Gary comes into me with the song, and we listened to it, and it's as country as a cob. We all know that. But there was something about that song that people loved. And he says, should we play it? I said, let's play it. So all of a sudden, we go from Def Leppard to Elvira. I mean, back to back, you could actually heard that on key. So, well, we had a general manager at the time named Charlie Hicks.
Yeah.
And Charlie was by the book kind of general manager. He had come from North Carolina, and Charlie and I had bumped heads many times over things that he thought we should do and things that I thought we should do. And so all of a sudden, when WKEE starts playing Elvira, I get yanked into his office. Why are we playing that song? I said, well, I said, Gary brought it to me, and I said,
you had to have a chart or something.
It's a great tune, and I said, people want to hear it. He says, we can't play that on WKEE. I said, well, why not? People want to know. And so we got into a little in-house thing.
Yeah.
Well, he ends up calling the owner of the radio station in Raleigh, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And he gets involved in this thing. So Charlie comes to me the next day and he says, what are you doing Thursday? And I said, I don't know. He says, well, Jim, which was his name, is flying up from Raleigh. We're going to have a meeting in the conference room over Elvira.
Over that one song.
One song. So anyway, Thursday afternoon, Gary, myself, the general manager, Charlie Hicks, and a couple of the people from Raleigh all come up, and we have this round table discussion about the song, whether it should be played or not. And so everybody spoke their piece on it, and so I got it around. With the the owner of the radio, or the radio chain at the time, it was Capital Broadcasting out of Raleigh.
Right.
He looked at me, he looked at Gary, and he said, guys, should we be playing this song? I said, yeah. Gary said yes. And he says, well, play it. This meeting is done. So we got up, and they go back to the airport, get back in his private jet, and they fly back to Raleigh. So we had this big to-do about the song Elvira, which I think history has pretty much proven that we were right on that. But the Oak Ridge Boys, I've had
It was a hit.
It was a hit, a huge hit, monster hit. Well, maybe one of the biggest of all time. And I told Richard Sturban that story because I've had quite a history with the Oak Ridge Boys over the years because they came to Portsmouth 22 years in a row.
Oh, wow.
So I had a
Okay.
chance to kind of get to know him pretty well. And he was
You became an
fascinated.
adopted Oak Ridge boy.
I was the fifth Oak Ridge boy.
Yeah.
No, but Richard Sturban was fascinated by that story. And
That's a great
I explained
story.
him about you and everything. So
Yeah.
that's just one of the things that Gary did behind the scenes that I thought was truly spectacular.
Well, thank you for that. Glad it did work out. And I kind of had the same thing happen in 92/94 that's more to my remembrance, and that's
Right.
when Billy Ray Cyrus released Achy Breaky Heart. And they called me in because I had met, people I knew had met him.
Mm-hmm.
And he played the Ragtime Lounge in Huntington for years and years.
Yeah, sure.
And he had played all the way around. I'm sure he played Portsmouth gigs, and then he played in parts of Kentucky and Ohio. And it was one of these, what do you think of this song? And I said, I got a feeling people are going to want to hear it, whether it does anything nationally or not. And the consultant at the time was a guy named Tracy Johnson, and he was on the phone. He said, you know what, I think that's a great song. And I said, well, I think you're probably right. And we put it on that afternoon, and it became the most requested song, I think.
Are we talking about Achy Breaky Heart?
I'm talking about Achy Breaky Heart. Yeah, yeah. Did I not mention
Achy
the title?
Breaky. Yeah.
It's, I mean, you could play that song, hang on, at the end of the song, pick up the request line, somebody would be requesting that song.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those you just couldn't escape it from anywhere. So it sounds kind of almost similar to our Elvira thing, although the people didn't come down from out of town. But
well, it just the passion, and you got to remember all this, Gary. You know, that I have to put myself in this perspective because I forget sometimes that all this was before social networking. That's the reason in my book I have a little the first social network, which was radio, and I think it's so important to realize that. You know, you didn't have any alternative places to go to hear music. You didn't have any alternative things. So the radio was the number one delivery source of everything that you listen to in music.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah, people don't understand that today when you mention that. Let's talk a little bit about when you started. Okay, you were the night guy for a while, then there were a couple of night guys, and then I came along in 78. You came back in 1980, is that correct?
80 to 85
and
with Clint.
You were the program director at the time.
And Morning Man, yes.
And Morning Man, yeah. Well, how did you hook up? Did you hook yourself up with Clint, or did that come about by accident?
Well, yes, it kind of came by accident because I was...
The Get Up and Go show, and then and they still do what you use.
I do. I still use the Get Up and Go show in Portsmouth.
Okay.
I virtually walked to the radio station on Monday after Rick Robinson, and Rick has become a really good friend. He always was.
Rick's a good guy.
But Rick and I, you know, we could try to get together as often as we can. But Rick was the morning guy, so he left on Friday to go to work for the West Virginia State Police. So I show up Monday morning, and I haven't been, it wasn't like the management introduced me or anything. I had to get a key underneath the mat of the radio station to get in. And Rob, back to our buddy Rob, he says, "Oh, get that key under the mat, go on in. Get there about an hour early so you can kind of prep yourself." I said, "Oh, okay." So I go in. The night guy was there by the name of Greg Smith. I don't know if you remember.
Oh,
Greg
I do remember Greg Smith.
Okay. So anyway, this guy gives me.
I think it was me, 6 to 10. It's coming to me now that Bob Lee, his real name's Bobby Leach. He does a shift on our oldie station. Bob Lee was on from 10 to 2.
Okay.
And Greg Smith was on 2 to 6.
All right. So my deal was to go in about an hour before and, learn the equipment and where everything was, because I had not been in that studio for a long time.
That makes it rough.
Yeah. So I get in there, and Clint McElroy had just got there, and he was doing the news. He was in Tampa, and Rob had just hired him to come to Huntington to do the news, to make him news director. I think he was the news director. Well, Clint and I just hit it off from the beginning. That morning, he comes busting in, and we, hey, I'm Steve Hayes. Well, I'm Clint McElroy, and we introduced ourselves kind of on the air, but and just got along great. The chemistry was just so good. And then to find out how funny Clint was off the air, doing voices,
Exactly.
and doing all the kind of stuff that Clint did. Well, Charlie Hicks, who became the general manager. Jim Evelyn was our general manager for a short period of time and left. But Charlie Hicks then came and was not a big fan of Clint doing voices on the morning show, especially as the news guy. Okay. So we developed, Spud Rimshot, Ducky Crabtree, all these characters. So finally, we started to being asked to go out in public and do them. Well, Charlie Hicks said, absolutely, you're not going to go out and as Clint McElroy. So what he ended up having to do is Spud Rimshot, which became kind of our he was kind of the mascot of the show.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. He had to wear a mask. So we had this Spud mask made by, I believe it was Clint's ex, or his wife at the time. Mm-hmm. And so we had this mask that was just the goofiest thing in the world. That was to hide the fact that Clint was the news director. For no other reason, the general manager did not want anybody to know that Clint did all these voices.
So behind the mask, he was, with the mask, he was Spud Rimshot.
Yes, but without the mask, he was Clint.
Wow.
So we had to live with that for several years.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, until finally, I think Charlie ended up leaving, and so we were able to, bring Clint out of the character closet, so to speak.
Well, people have asked me since we started this about you.
Yeah.
We had a night guy for a while. You probably aren't familiar with him, named Burke Allen.
Oh, I know Burke well. I know Burke well.
Did I actually brought him out of Logan. It was one of the few things I did.
Yeah.
In the interim, in the 2 minutes I was program director. Steve left, and it came to me because I was the right choice. But the problem is the administrative part of it, I just didn't gel well with. I had trouble telling my friends, you can be a Captain Kirk or a Mr. Spock. I was much better being a Spock.
You're a very nice guy, by the way. For those of you who don't know, he is a very genuinely nice guy. So I know where you're coming from on that.
Well, I just couldn't do things that they wanted me to do. And Tufi Kassim brought me into that. You remember Tufi?
Oh, yeah.
Tufi brought me into his office. Sit down, Gary. He said, I'm this close to firing you. And I said, have I been doing that bad job on the air? I've done what I've always done. I'm not talking about being on the air. I'm talking about being program director. You are lousy at it. And I said, Tufi, I agree with you. I agree with you. And at that point, I was very lucky to be able to keep my job on the air because that's where my strength was. And Rick Maney became the operations manager, and I kept the music director title, and because I seemed to be the one person that could put charts together and call R&R every week and meet with the music people that called us, and all that. So,
well, to put all the levels together, Rick Maney ended up going to Portsmouth, Ohio.
Yeah.
When I got hired in '99 by Rob, he was the general manager.
Okay.
I became their operations manager and the morning guy. And then when Rick left, the mid-2015s, around in that area, then I became the GM and the morning guy. But Rick Maney is, I got to congratulate him. He has his first grandkid that was born just yesterday. Congratulations, Rick. Right? Oh yeah. We've been monitoring that. But Rick retired around 2015, 16, but had done a great job working with Key, as operations manager.
Well, he and I made it great. I mean, if we could have kept that chemistry going, I would talk to him about things I needed to talk to him about. When it came to music, he'd say, "You're the man. You go ahead and fly off with it. And if I have any problems, I'll let you know." And he never did. And it just, it got to the point where it was crazy because we were a station without a captain. We didn't have a program director.
Right.
And that's when they brought in, about 88 or so, they brought in the first out-of-market program director.
They're called consultants, and then
Well,
you could also bring them in.
This guy was brought in as a program director. He took the PD job, left the office, and everybody was gone but me, it seemed like. And but he didn't know any of my history at all. So he didn't know, you know, he said, I remember a write-up he did that I wasn't supposed to see that said, I am impressed with this guy at times, and at times I'm rather disappointed by him. So it was like, you know, you never knew what, but I couldn't be anybody else.
But there's no disappointment in this book on Gary Music Miller because, again,
Gary Music Miller, he gets to read about himself.
Available on Amazon, by the way. And no, I was just, you bring up some great points. And, you know, this business, as I'll be honest with you, as Gary's been, it's not all fun and it's not all what people perceive it as, because there's a lot of behind the scenes moments where, as he was just talking about, Gary, where your art is perhaps not as appreciated as much as you think it is. And again, you have personality people that don't quite gel into maybe your own personal persona. And it's tough to navigate yourself through these waters of radio through the years. You have to be kind of careful, but you also have to be very perceptive as to down the road. And who would have ever perceived, Gary, when you and I were doing radio in the mid 80s and in the 90s, that all of a sudden in the early 2000s, there would be this thing called the internet that would come along and just take it into a million different directions. Things like that. Then you had other personalities involved in, you know, trying to derail radio as video killed the radio star. That never happened. But once we got into the internet wild frontier, people then had choices. And the one thing that I've always said, and I live by, and again, it's all in this book, kind of. We have choices. You have choices. People are making choices right now to either watch this or not watch this.
Right.
And you can go from this to a million other things. You've got to be good radio. You've got to be great local radio, because I believe it's the last bastion of local broadcasting that we have left.
Absolutely. And the reason I left was because I think there were several thousand people let go the same day when a major corporation took over.
Right.
Key. And I don't want to burn any bridges over that. But
it wasn't local anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And if you call Key now, you get a live morning show, and then the rest of the day you're going to get a busy signal. You know, the days of making requests and giving away prizes and stuff, a lot of that's gone. But thank God you get to keep doing what you're doing up in Portsmouth. And I was ready. I can't believe I came there in '78 and did not leave till 2009. I was there 31 years. Yeah, that's not probably a record for people in radio. You've been in radio longer than that, but I've been told that may be a record for people at the same radio station.
Well, I tell you, a good friend of mine that I'm good friends with on Facebook, Steve Bishop. He's been there forever.
In Charleston?
In Charleston, yeah. And there are a few of these guys, like, you know, myself, Steve, that, you know, the biggest question I always get, and I don't know whether this is people that are tired of me or not, is when are you going to retire?
When are you going to retire?
But no, if you do what you love every day, you don't work a day in your life. We've heard that over and over.
Certainly, yeah.
And you were, if I can say this, Gary was a fixture because his show was fun. You knew what you were going to get. I think a lot of the people who listened got caught up in your energy at night, and that's what nighttime radio is all about. And that was, I think,
to
one
me
of the
it was.
things. Well, and you did it well.
In town
You did it well.
You know, I said that these guys were making it in Chicago, acting like crazy guys, and you can't understand them half the time. They're very loud. They're very self-absorbed. So why can't I do that in Huntington?
Another guy you've had on this show before, I'm going to throw him out, is Ernie G. Anderson, because Ernie, I ended up having the luxury of hiring him 3 times, or maybe 4, but not out of. Ernie was one of these kinds of guys like you. He did his job so well, but sometimes you get caught up in changes. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Radio, the only thing constant in radio is change. And when it happens, you got a good guy, and Ernie is one of the best, and I think he's been in there 56 years, 57
absolutely.
years.
Yeah, absolutely.
Way to go, Ern.
The problem was you didn't always get along. I mean, I can't even count the number of management, ownership changes, program directors that I worked for, and to think that I made it almost 4 decades, latter part of the 70s, the entire 80s, the entire 90s, and the entire 2000s. And by 2009, when I left Key, sort of under guidance, it was really the smart thing to do. I was 23 in 1978, and I was 54 trying to be Gary Music Miller. You know,
you did it well.
It was 54 when I left, and that's about long enough to be a top 40 DJ. And I'll be honest with you, and I've been honest with everybody on this show, I can talk about the 90s and 2000s if you want. I was there during the entire time, but Dave and I, we center in on the 70s and 80s. We just, that's the whole channel is about feeding your need for nostalgia, your hunger for it. And that's one of the reasons Steve's here, and I hope you guys are happy that I brought Steve on. I know
we've been working on this for a while.
We have. We've talked about it since last year, and I've had health issues. We've had weather issues. I do need to mention to you that Dave Black, who's usually in this seat, is the purveyor of this whole thing. I mean, he named the show. He got me to do it. I was very quiet, being just Gary Miller, and Gary Music. He said, "You still got people out there that know who you are," and so we set this thing up, and it's been a 2-way street for you to be able to contact me via email, rdwgmm@gmail.com. And I look forward to your letters, and we read those on our show here. And I'll still call them listeners. It's watchers. Thank you for being watchers. I need to thank you if you're a subscriber. And I hope you've waited through the end of I'm not saying it's all over. I'm not sure it is. But wait through the end of the show. I'm trying to think what people out there want to know about you. That and I think you've covered most of it. But I think I remember you from nights because you were the kind of guy I wanted to be. Most people ask me about you and Clint, and I say, "You think I got Clint on the show?" Well, Clint's got an 18-page Wikipedia. I mean, my God! I mean, he's become such a huge star.
Well, he and his sons.
His sons, yeah.
And they're in this book too, by the way. Which I'll give you the full thing in the end. I keep throwing this up as a prop because I don't have anything else to do except my water, which is almost empty.
Well, that's the problem. To me, it's not water. It's like a nice little bottle.
Well, the one thing when we ended up, I was with Clint from 80 to 85, and then I left to go to.
You left to go there, and I became program director. That's the part where I'm a little hazy. I remember I was there long enough. Hazy, yes. I was there long enough to. I brought Burke Allen in from Logan, and I thought, what a great voice this guy has, and he does. He has a really good set of pipes, and he's a consultant now. And people have asked me about him. They asked me about Clint. I've said, I don't think I can do anything with Clint. I actually sent Dan Hatton a note that we were doing this. And thankfully, Steve's still around and is able to do it. And I don't know where we'll go from here as far as guests are concerned. We might find one or two down the road. But anything else you want to add other than...
That book, you mean? Called Don't Touch That Radio Dial. You don't know where it's been?
Just like the book. I touched the book. He had no idea where my hand was.
Well, Gary Music Miller is in this book, and with some of the great. The book is about. I mean, if you enjoy this show, and I've really enjoyed being here with you, I really have. It's radio stories. It's things that I use my pedestal to bring other people to light. There's chapters in here about. The Oak Ridge Boys, like we talked about, the time I had to MC one of the weirdest things in life, which was Koski, the human bomb in Houston, Texas.
Okay.
Now, we've all had to have our fair share of MC jobs, but to MC a guy that blew himself up is something that it's book worthy. Let's put it that way. Yeah. But also I have a website if you are interested. It has a lot of podcasts on there, and it's got Jack O'Shea. I got a chance to interview Jack right before he passed. And it's an easy one to remember, just at stevehayesbooks.com. stevehayesbooks.com. And I archived a lot of nostalgia from the 70s, 80s, other interviews and so on and so forth. But I decided to try to put all my radio stuff somewhere where people could find it.
That's really nice. And I've been asked to sort of to do the same, but I come up with 2 chapters, and it's like, I didn't do that. What I did have some funny memories, and I've had a bunch of them. My most embarrassing story, I'll tell you after we get off the air. I've told it twice, I think, here. It happened to me at the Tri-State Fair in Regatta. You'll love this story. Okay. I'll tell it to you when it's over. But if there's anything we didn't bring up, I can always get a hold of Steve. So if there's something you want to ask about him, please do. If we didn't cover anything, I did get probably 2-3 weeks ago, somebody wrote me, and I mentioned on the air we were going to try to get you on the air, on the webcast. There'll always be listeners, and it will always be on the air. Instead of the viewers or not, but I mentioned you. Well, and she said, does he keep in touch with Clint? And I said, I don't know if Clint, I don't know how huge Clint. Last time I saw Clint was 2012. Yeah. And
there's a little band of us that all keep in touch we have a thread, and one of them is Clint, Rick Maney, and this is all on sports because we're all sports fanatics for the Reds, the Bengals, and Ohio State, and Kentucky, and all that. Yeah. So we keep in touch, and Clint is, as you mentioned, is very much busy right now. His sons are doing some great work, and he's part of that. My brother, and me, and. I love him. If you're watching this, Clint, I love you because we've had so many great times together, and you too, Gary Music Miller.
He knows. He knows how I feel about him. Yeah. He was there to support me through some very rough times I had back in the early 2000s or 2010s, and we had some tough time, and Clint was always there, and then he disappeared, and I haven't seen him since. So I haven't been to Comic-Con then. Maybe I'll run into him.
Well, if you run there, you'll find him.
I probably will.
With my funny book, I can't call them funny book, graphic novels that he stole from me many years ago that are probably worth $1 million. But we won't go there right now because I already said I loved him.
No, what was I going to say? Somebody asked me one time, "Why don't you do a Comic-Con?" I have somebody asked me my very first what's the word I'm looking for? Cross with fame before my radio days. 1967. Right. I had a letter published in Flash Comics, number 175. So we have a couple of comic book writers around here, and I've said I beat you in the print. And then 75 was 11 years old, I think. But I know time's fleeting, and I could go on forever.
Thank you, Gary. I appreciate you having me on. I really do.
If I tried to stretch it out, it's only because I don't want to say goodbye to you. It's great. It's great.
This guy right here, I'm telling you what, man, he's what radio's made out of, and thank you for all that listened to him. No.
People ask me, do you miss it? And my thing is, here I am with my microphone. Sorry I made all that noise. My thing is I miss the way it used to be. Yeah. And that's really my answer. Yeah. My pat answer. I don't miss it now. Automation computerization and whatever the other word I'm looking for, Asian. There's another Asian. So many people you hear on the radio aren't even really there. They may not even be in the same city. So you need to support people like Steve and
Thank you.
people that have employed local radio, because it just, they got a way of fooling you, making them sound like they're there.
Well, the people that get it, the people that get up with you every morning or listen at night or all throughout the day know what real radio is all about. And again, I thank you, the listeners, for doing it and listening. And I thank, again, Gary Music Miller. You're one of my favorites. Gary Music Miller on Key 100 FM.
Everybody else does a better impression of me than I do.
All right.
I mentioned Alligator Jackson, I think.
Yes, you did.
He's written so much stuff. He's like the local reporter. When John Schneider came to do something here recently, when so-and-so was in town, the whole Crispies, Randy Moss fiasco here. Alligator covers all of that. Alligator did one of our most listened to shows, and he remembers me back when before I remember myself. So Alligator said a lot of nice things about you.
Well, thank you.
Me,
thanks, Alligator.
Clint, and just the entire staff at Key. So,
all right.
And if you've never seen it, he's got a tribute to WKEE, and it's Glory Days, early 80s, right?
Yeah, and it's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube.
Yeah.
So you're on YouTube now watching us.
Yeah.
Until then, Dave is fine. Dave will be joining me, I'm sure, next time. And it's a pleasure to meet Steve and his wife, Paula. Welcome to Huntington.
My lovely wife, Paula, who came up here today, and she loves this museum, and she's been wandering around. I've only seen her like once in the last hour. Did you take care of her? Okay.
She's here in front of the WSAZ camera.
All righty.
Thank you all. Thank you
guys.
to the West Virginia Museum of Radio and Technology. Thank you for housing this. You guys can come down here if you want to sit in the chair that Gary Music Miller sat in, or sit in the chair that Steve Hayes sat in.
Or the counter or the book laid called "Don't Touch That Radio Dial." You don't know where it's been.
They're going to try to put that on display somewhere.
Well, they just informed me they have a bookstore here. I'm going to see if I can get some copies in here.
Okay, great.
All right, thank you, Gary.
Thank you. I can hardly wait to read the book. Thank you. Till next time. We love you guys. Thank you, and please subscribe. Okay, it makes us look good with YouTube. Bye bye.